Listeners, I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. Today, we have a special guest with us today. Her name is Kathy. She is a sound therapist, and I am super excited to hear a lot more about this because I myself enjoy sound therapy, especially my Reiki sessions. So, Kathy, nice to have you on here. Thank you.
Hi, Robin. I'm so happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, okay. Well, as you mentioned, I am a what we call a sound healing practitioner, and I'm also a Reiki master. And I do that. I've also written a book. I'm an author. My book's name is Suffering to Thriving, and it's all about your toolkit for navigating the healing journey. And it's my own healing journey that prompted me to write the book and to delve deeper into sound healing as well as Reiki. I've been doing them for many years. I grew up as a classically trained musician, and so sound was just kind of a natural for me to get into. And then when I started having big health challenges of my own, I started looking for just lots of complementary approaches to healing, and that's when I really took a deep dive into both Reiki and sound healing and got all of my credentials and everything. Yeah, in a nutshell.
So tell us, if you don't mind my asking, tell us a little bit about when you said from suffering to, so what did you go through? What is your story as far as your suffering?
Yeah, well, it's been kind of a lifelong
Mm-hmm.
healing journey challenge, I'd say. When I was in my 20s, I started having a lot of spinal issues. I was very active, athletic. I loved to dance. I was a runner. I was just into everything. And I began having some pretty serious health challenges. And I had all of the exams and everything. And I basically was told when I was 21 years old that I had the spine of an 80-year-old woman, and that I would probably be in a wheelchair by the time I was in my mid 30s.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrifying. You can imagine
Right.
being 21 and hearing that. And at the time, they didn't have a lot of really good treatments or anything. But I decided at that point, Robin, I would not own that. I knew I had the issues, but I was not going to be in a wheelchair. And I'm happy to say that, today, all these years later, I'm really good. And so through my life, I was managing. It put me on a very good path for learning more about complementary medicine. And I just began integrating a lot of things. And that's when I began to learn about Reiki and sound healing.
Mm-hmm.
I then began, to learn more and practice. I ended up having 4 spinal disc ruptures, and the last one was in 2016. I have like these 7 spinal diseases that are really difficult, any one of them, but having like all 7 of them, they're hereditary in nature. Um, so when this disc ruptured in 2016, I was flat on my back, bedridden for years. Like for 5 years, I
Wow.
did not have much of a life. And that's the suffering part. You realize
Yeah.
that you could be suffering through the whole thing, or you could look at it as maybe this is an opportunity for me to create some kind of a new life,
Mm-hmm.
to have a different perspective on healing and my own journey, and start asking all the right questions. Like, maybe this is a blessing in disguise.
Right.
Certainly, that first year or so, I was like, I was in such a bad place.
Right.
And then I began to realize, everything in life is a choice, as we always hear. Suffering
Yes.
is a choice. I'm not talking about suffering like people in Ukraine or other war torn countries
Right.
going through, right? But just like in our minds,
Right. Correct.
are we causing ourselves to choose suffering, or do we want to choose to thrive? And
Mm-hmm.
so, flat on my back, couldn't do much of anything else. I began just contemplating and journaling a lot, and that's how the book came along. And I'm thrilled to say I'm in a thriving place right now. And I just love sharing that message with people because I know there are lots of people out there who go through horrible things. I mean, even
Right.
worse than I went through, and it is hard getting through. But there are ways to make your mind your medicine. It's all about
Mhm.
finding your medicine. Music and sound and energy medicine are parts of my medicine.
Yes.
I would say nature is medicine.
Mhm.
Exercise can be medicine. Cooking and baking can be medicine.
Yeah.
Like people define it in their own ways, right? And
Yes.
so it's all about figuring out what that is for you, what really lights you up, and what makes the time go by quickly, where you're in a state of joy or awe, and really gets you out of that terrible dark place that we can end up in when we're facing big disruptions in life and all these things that we're talking about. Yeah, for the healing journey for sure, and that's physical, mental, or emotional, but
Mhm.
also any life crisis, like you lose a job, um, the loss of someone dear in your life, whether it's a breakup or a death or a divorce. Lots of things happen in life that disrupt us, right? And
Yeah.
it's all about using that in a way that helps you find purpose and meaning in life instead
Yeah.
of going down, into a place of just bitterness and anger and all the emotions that definitely come up, but we don't have to live there is sort of the point.
Absolutely. So how did you, come off of bed rest? Like what was your story there?
Yeah, it was a long one. It took me years. I could not walk from bed to the bedroom door for many, many, many months. I mean, it was months and months. I mean, my husband helped me with everything, friends
Mhm.
helped. I could do nothing, basically.
Yeah.
It was an extreme pain. But I began to look at things as, like the doctors, they couldn't operate because of all of these diseases I have. They
Mhm.
couldn't operate. And so I just began to research anything I could try. And I
Yeah.
did. There's a chapter in the book called Super Sleuthy, and it's all about like researching like every single thing and
Yes.
trying the ones that speak to you, use your intuition, what makes sense. And I ended up trying a lot of things, everything from supplements and magnet therapy and traction and I mean, a million things, right? And what I found was things worked incrementally. They
Mhm.
began to work. And so much so that my doctors would see me for like a 6 month checkup or something. I say, what are you doing? Because like that's surprising, that you're
Yeah.
you're improving so well. Um, Setting goals, if I couldn't do like at first I couldn't walk to the bedroom door. And then once I could, it was like, okay, next goal, the kitchen.
Right. Yeah.
Setting goals for yourself in a way that pushes you, I mean, to the point of not hurting yourself, but pushes you in a good way to figure out, what wasn't doable yesterday might be doable tomorrow, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
approached everything from the standpoint of inability versus ability.
Mm.
Okay, so there were a million things I couldn't do. I mean, the walking is one example, but I'm a classically trained musician and I was performing like
Yeah.
a couple times a weekend right before this happened. And so I can't play my classical flute because it goes out
Mhm.
to the side and it really torques your back in a way that was very painful and actually damaging to the condition that I had. And so I would, with everything that I would love to do, standing at an easel and painting, couldn't do that anymore. I actually made a list and said, what can I not do? But
Mhm.
used it not as a way to complain, but to say, all right, what can I do? What is my ability? And with classical flute, I couldn't do that, but I could play my frame drum, which I'd balance on my belly and play.
Yeah.
I would play my Native American flutes, which play straight down, so there was not that torquing issue. I couldn't stand at an easel and paint, but I could sketch, right? And
Yeah.
so for everything on the list, it was like, all right, can't do that, but I am not going to sit here and just be miserable all day. What
Yeah.
gives me joy? And again, it's about what fills you up, what gives you joy, what makes you happy, how can you find a way to do that?
Yeah.
And there and a lot of things I'm back to doing. I'm back to all of my music and walking and just the whole thing, and it's great. There are things I'll probably never do. Like I will never be a runner. Um,
Hmm.
I can swim, but I can't run. I can't hike in the mountains anymore. But
Yeah.
I can take walks in a park. So it's all about not hanging out in that place of
Hmm.
woe is me, poor me, I can't do all this stuff, and saying, all right. And what I like to say is, and this sounds weird, but your healing journey is embedded in your life's journey, of course,
Hmm.
which is embedded in your soul's journey, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe this disruption in your life of a health, nature, or otherwise is a portal into a new life, right?
Yeah.
In my case, it was.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing like all of these things that I loved before, the sound healing, the Reiki, writing. I always have enjoyed those things.
Hmm.
Now they are central to my life. And
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing. Like I probably wouldn't have gotten off the career track I was on as I was doing fundraising and grant writing and all for and marketing for nonprofit organizations that
Hmm.
make the world a better place. Great job. But, killer deadlines and stress. I
Right.
probably would not have gotten off of that, left to my own devices. It was like I needed this in
Yeah.
order to find a new way of being in the world, really. That's what
Yeah.
it boils down to. And that's when we come out the other side, we can say, "Oh, I see it. It was a blessing. It was a gift,"
Yes.
right? When you're in
Yes.
it, it's really hard to do that. I did not. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I wasn't sitting around saying, "Oh, this is great."
Yeah.
It
And
wasn't.
what was that like? Because I know there had to have been some really dark times. So was it your husband? Was it yourself doing the research? What got you out of those dark times during moments like
Yeah, there were dark times. And I'll say to your listeners, Robin, like I have my whole life suffered from depression on and off and
that?
anxiety and stuff. And so I say to all your listeners, if you are in that dark place, don't be afraid to ask for help. That is the first step. And I did that. It was like
Mhm.
I knew I was in a dark place when this happened after about the first 3 months, because I was just the eternal optimist saying, okay, well, in the past, it was 3 months, 6 months. I'm going to get through this. Those markers in time came and I was no better or very,
Yeah.
very not, I mean, just so tiny better that most other people couldn't even see that. So
Yeah.
at that point, you do begin to get very depressed. And like, if again, listeners, if you're going through something that's a really dark time, depression or other mental illness, it's not a weakness to ask for help. It's the cornerstone of what you have to do to save your life. You can't get to all of these wonderful places without getting through those moments of darkness. And it takes help for most of us, I think. And
Yeah.
so that was the first thing. And then, I mean, my husband was fantastic. He saved me, really. I couldn't do anything for myself,
Yeah.
really, very long time. Friends, were my lifeline via Zoom and phone calls, and they brought groceries, they brought dinner,
Yeah.
came and just sat at my bedside and just sat and just talked and listened. And
Yeah.
that's an important thing. If you know somebody going through something like this, it's important to listen and just be a witness to it. Sometimes you don't know what
Absolutely.
to say, and that's okay. It really is. Yeah. So there were hard times for sure, but get the help that you need. And then, I don't know, it's almost like a flashlight. It's like at some point you wake up one day and things are just a little brighter and
Hmm.
you see a path over there. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can just pivot a little bit and find the next step. And it is about that. It's like setting goals. It's like everything's incremental. You take one baby step at a time,
Yeah.
and eventually it gets you to a much better place.
Yeah.
In the darkness of those really horrible times in any kind of crisis, it's hard to see the next step. It's hard to see a glimmer of light. And that's
Exactly.
your tribe can be so helpful, right? Of just
Mhm.
being there for you and telling you. I can't tell you how many friends said to me, "It's not always going to be this way. You always pull through. You have a track record. You know, it you always pull through somehow. It's going to happen." I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's going to happen or not." But they sort of hold you up, you know?
yeah.
That's
That's
important.
beautiful. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, how did you make the transition from, or just merging the classical music with the sound healing?
Yeah, I I guess I started playing. My mom taught me how to play piano beginning when I was 3 years old. So
Hmm.
I'll start with that saying I was just always a really inquisitive child when it came
Yeah.
to music, and so then I began playing classical flute, and I've always just picked up instruments here and there. I think the pivotal point was I was living in Santa Monica,
Hmm.
and I would go to drum circles on the beach, or there were lots of places, yoga centers and meditation centers, where you could experience sound. Um, and so I just started getting really curious about it. I felt so good. And at
Hmm.
that point, it was from, anxiety and just stress and everything. It just made me feel so good. I just wanted more of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, so I started buying like little Tibetan bowls and
Hmm.
chimes, all the things. And then I thought, I have to learn more about this. And so I just really took it a deep dive into. I started reading that sound really could be healing on a bigger level than the things we associate it with, I guess, in the beginning, healing anxiety, putting us in a better mood, relieving stress, help you going into that really, really joyful place. I started reading. There's lots more to it, and scientists have been finding the most amazing discoveries about sound. There are sound healing has been integrated into hospitals and nursing homes throughout the United States, right,
Yeah.
as well as all over Europe, and it's really spreading. What I've noticed is it's really catching on. It is not a fad, and the thing is, Robin, it's like these healing modalities of sound, our ancestors have been doing them for
Hmm.
thousands and thousands of years. They make these new archaeological discoveries, and they find drums and rattles and bone flutes. I just read an article about bone flutes dating 11 to 13,000 years ago, and they say that they're probably even before that, but things kind of disintegrate. But
Yeah.
it has been a practice of human beings, probably since the beginning of humanity. But what
Right.
scientists are catching up to is it's not just this thing that makes us feel good. In fact, when I began studying, I took a class with a guy by the name of John Stewart Reed. He is a
Mhm.
sonic scientist. He works hand in hand with medical researchers. And what they're finding is sound at certain frequencies actually invigorate blood cells. Like they would look
Mhm.
at blood cells in a petri dish and apply certain frequencies to it. And any cell in the body that is not working, it could be diseased, it could be just dying, it could be non-functional. Science, okay, let me back up a step. I get so excited about this. It's the geeky science side of me, but there's a researcher out of UCLA, James Jimzewski, who has discovered that every cell in your body makes a sound. We don't hear it,
Mhm.
obviously, but with their equipment, they can pick up the sound, and they do different frequencies. Like heart cells might have a different frequency than a blood cell, right? And so
What?
it's
That
amazing.
is amazing.
And
Yeah.
this is new. This is kind of new in the past couple of years, this finding. Well, he has discovered now that the very sounds that the optimal cells emit,
Mhm.
if a cell is dead or diseased, dying, um, if they apply that frequency, the cells sort of come back to doing their cellular function. In other words, what revives cells is the very sound that they emit. I find that fascinating.
That
And
is.
it's and so another thing, this is very new. I there was a sound healing summit just a couple weeks ago, and John Stewart Reed, my teacher, was talking about how um, 40 hertz, and hertz is simply the number of beats per minute. 40 hertz is very, very low, but 40 hertz has been found within the past year of research that it stimulates the brain cells. That's their unique frequency. It stimulates the brain cells, and they believe that this portends amazing things for people suffering from dementia, but also for the rest of us who don't have dementia, applying those sound frequencies in such a way that it helps to prevent it. So, I mean, it's extraordinary what sound healing's role is going to be in medicine,
Yeah.
and lots of the sound researchers and they do all of this combined with, in fact, that study that I just mentioned about the 40 hertz was done with sonic scientists and MIT. There's
Oh,
another out of Rutgers. So these are all of the real, credible institutions,
yeah.
research who are partnering with these sonic scientists to figure these things out, and it's extraordinary. Yeah, and the thing about sound is it's so accessible for people, right? Like, you don't have to go to a yoga studio or a meditation center to hear sound. That's really helpful. But the real magic is when, and by magic, I don't mean actual magic, I mean kind of
Yeah.
where the healing really happens is when it's in a one-on-one session.
Yes.
Because, right, you've done this. So when a sound healer like myself works with somebody, you ask, what are your concerns? What are the issues that you're having that you would like to deal with? And by choosing instruments of those frequencies that resonate with the chakras in our body,
Mhm.
and they the short version is the sounds stimulate those particular regions of the body, and
Right.
they open up blockages, they restore balance. And
Mhm.
so that's where amazing healing can happen. And I see this all the time with the clients that I work with. It's really rather remarkable that it works
Absolutely.
this way. So in an integrated way, and I always tell people, work with your Western doctors. Western medicine has saved my life numerous
Mhm.
times. So always work with your doctor, but then work to integrate these other practices like Reiki and sound healing. And I often build Reiki, which is energy medicine, into a sound bath, and vice versa. They complement.
Yeah.
They're both vibrational medicines, and we are energy beings, right? I
Yes.
think maybe
Yes.
Einstein first said that, right? We're
Yes.
energy beings, and the reason sound works so well. Our bodies are anywhere, depending on the region of the body, anywhere between 60 and 75% water. Water's
Mhm.
a better conductor than air. And
Mhm.
so it really resonates within our body's tissues. Um, and again, getting back to that research about the cells are like little antenna. They pick up on those frequencies and they respond by healing. Yeah.
So is it each individual cell that emits a certain frequency, or is it like the heart cells emit their own frequency together? Then like different parts of the body, different cells as a group, or is it specifically each individual cell?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't have enough of the science to know. I understand just broadly that like brain cells um, vibrate at a different frequency than heart cells.
Okay. Okay.
Whether brain cells, each have their own individual frequency, I'm not so sure. It's probably within a range is what I'm guessing. But
Because
yeah.
you would think that that would make sense with like the chakras then,
Yeah,
right? Like your
right.
heart, your throat, so the root chakra. So it's like maybe there's something like now I have to start researching it so I
Right.
can I can better understand it myself. So what do you use during your Reiki healing sessions as far as the sound healing?
Before I tell you that, I just pulled up a quote that I
Mhm.
just love. It's related to the question you just asked. There's
Uh-huh.
an oncologist by the name of Dr. Mitchell Gaynor. He's an
Mhm.
oncologist and he's a sound practitioner. And this is his quote. He says, "Sound can redress imbalances on every level of physiological functioning and can play a positive role in the treatment of virtually any medical disorder."
Mhm.
I mean, I just find that to be amazing because,
Yeah.
as we know, what we just learned about, how the different cells of different regions of the body have a different frequency. If researchers can continue to pinpoint, like we know the brain, what I just said, 40 hertz, but if somebody's having a heart issue, what is the
Mhm.
resonance of the heart? What is the resonance of the blood? The ideal optimal resonance. And then to get to your question about the instruments I use, I have curated quite a diverse kind of grouping of instruments. Not all sound healers do this, but I start, of course, with the crystal bowls and
Mhm.
the bowls. And the crystal bowls are tuned to each chakra. And
Oh, okay.
so when you're hearing a beautiful, and this is really interesting, I had a client a couple months ago. At the end, she says, "What was that third note that you kept playing when you were repeating this one sequence?" Like, oh my gosh, I play, so many things. I play intuitively and I don't always know. So I kind of backtracked and I says, well, let's see. It was the F note, which
Mhm.
is for the heart. And she says, something happened inside of me. It was like a bolt of energy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's really interesting. It's the heart chakra.
Yeah.
And you've been going through a tremendously difficult time as a caregiver and felt that she was closing off her heart. So it made sense that it would
Yeah.
resonate, right? It was really beautiful. So, anyway, it starts with the crystal bowls, the Tibetan bowls also. But more broadly than that, I love using Native American flutes. I
Mhm.
have a few of them in different keys. Again, they're tuned to a different key. Um, and I love using the frame drum. Drums have been around since the beginning of mankind, and it's said that drum beat resembles the heartbeat when we're in our
Mhm.
mother's womb, right? So
Yeah.
there is something very deeply healing about it. Just listening to that sort of a drum beat can just take us to a very, very beautiful, relaxed, calm place. One of my favorite instruments to work with is the gong. I
Mhm.
absolutely adore it. And people, you know, when I if I'm seeing a client for the first time, I explain I'm going to use the gong, and you can always see them wince a little bit, like, "Oh no, not the gong, really?"
Yeah.
But played not too loud, played in a proper sequence. The gong, like many other instruments, like the frame drums, like other instruments, it has areas on it that correspond to the chakra system. And
Yeah.
so you can play it in such a way that you begin with grounding and you take people to a higher level of meditation relaxation. You can play it from that place if they're very agitated or nervous, in their minds. You can bring them down to a very grounded, centered place. I've worked with people who have had writer's block or artist block, and
Mhm.
there's an area of the gong, as in frame drums, also, that is more the fire element. And that
Yeah.
fire element, works with our root and sacral
Right.
chakras, right? And
Yeah.
and and builds energy in the body. And same thing if someone's suffering from fatigue. So working with the gong is also interesting because it has the largest range of hertz frequencies,
Mhm.
lower than what the human ear can hear, higher than what the human ear can hear, but your cells are hearing them. So
Yeah.
playing the gong, it's almost like every cell in the body is getting a little tune up in a way.
Yeah.
And it can be a really amazing thing. I also work with Zephyr chimes, which are
Mhm.
these chimes that have, yeah, all the different notes in them, and they're just really, really beautiful. I
Yeah.
sometimes use what is called a shruti. It's a instrument from India that
Uh-huh.
that you can program to different notes. And if you've heard people chant
Hmm.
or do mantras
Hmm.
of a nature from India, they often are using that as accompaniment. And you can set the notes in such a way that it's 5 notes apart. Five is kind of a magical number in sound healing, an
Hmm.
interval that's really powerful. So again, I don't use all the instruments in one sound bath. I would say I always use the bowls. I always use the Native American flutes. I always use the gong and the bells. I bring in other instruments as they might be needed. Yeah.
Right, right. So that makes kind of more sense because when I went to my Reiki healing, I loved it, but it was at a time when I was in a dark place and I was really stressed and I couldn't ground myself, which I
Oh,
realized I didn't know what it was at the moment with that. I didn't have a complete
right.
understanding of it. And when she started, she used a crystal singing bowl, but it was like when she did, it's like it moved me to instant trance. Like I was so relaxed
Oh,
instantly.
wow.
So
Oh,
what was that? So do you start your sessions off with just like the roots chakra just to ground your clients, or how does that?
usually I do. I'm glad you asked that. That's a really good question. So when I begin, I tend to use something like the little Zephyr chimes, and
Hmm.
I walk people through a meditation first. Uh,
Okay.
Sometimes I'll use a drum to accompany it, just depending on where they're at. If they need grounding, I might start with the drum instead of this. If they need relaxation, I'll start with the Zephyr chimes. But just playing that one instrument a little bit, I walk them through what I call the tree meditation. You might have heard that, where in you visualize in your stomach area little roots sprouting, going
Hmm.
down your legs, through your feet, down through the floor of your room, down into Mother Earth, you know, deeply, deeply grounding.
Yeah.
And then as we breathe in, we're breathing up that wonderful earth energy. And
Right.
and I use the analogy of a tree. Trees are so grounded. They can be
Yes.
hundreds of feet high, and in
Yeah.
the heavy winds, they don't fall over. They're
Yeah.
all right because they're grounded. And so I pretty much always start with a grounding exercise like that. And then I'll move into usually Native American flute or crystal bowls at that point and begin the real work of the sound healing. Yeah, but that grounding is important because
Yeah.
so often it's funny in healing today, a lot of practitioners are so in their crown chakra, which is the top of our heads, as you know,
Hmm.
um, that they're not as grounded as we need to be to get through
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of um, other healers, who have a lot of different energy practices, but this one woman who has been a long time practitioner, she was getting ready to give a session, and she
Hmm.
was racing around like hair on fire, just trying to get everything pulled together, and she rammed her foot into her door and broke
Oh.
her toes, and was in horrible pain, as you can imagine. But so she wanted to do a sound healing, and she says, I just need help with my foot. Just give me energy for my foot. I'm like, well, we're gonna do that. We're gonna get rid of that pain. But the problem was she was too much in her higher chakras,
Yeah.
not grounded. And when we're
Yeah.
not grounded, it is that feeling of racing around like our hair's on fire. Everything is like crazy, right?
Yeah.
You have to ground and take that breath. And it's only in that space that we can hear our intuition of what we even need in that moment.
Yeah.
Probably were I in her shoes in that moment, I would have said, I just need to ground myself and center myself so I can be present for my client, right? Like it
Wow.
comes down to that. And so that is a thing right now where a lot of practitioners, we all have a lot going on in our lives, right? Everybody has stress. They've got families and jobs and the whole thing. and you're trying to be of service to other people. And we kind of forget sometimes it starts by taking care of ourselves and ensuring that before we help anybody else. It's like the airplane and putting on the oxygen mask for yourself before helping somebody else, right? We all know
Right.
that
Yeah.
philosophy. It's the same thing as any kind of a helper in the world doing anything. We have to be there for ourselves with good self-care first. And
Yes.
yeah, that grounding really does come in very handy. I ground every day. I ground and say,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Because my question is, because when I first started one of my sessions,
yeah,
I was getting really dizzy. So does that mean that I was, because like once she kept going, then I was able to relax,
yeah.
and then the dizziness went away. But what was it too much energy in the higher chakras, or
But
what was
yeah,
that in
yeah,
your opinion?
that's what I would say. If that
Okay.
were me, I would say I'm way too much present in my higher chakras and not taking the time to really ground. That's why also when I begin a sound bath or sometimes a Reiki session, I'll begin with feet first in a Reiki session. And typically you begin with the higher chakras and work your way down, but it also can go the other way. If somebody is very, very much in their heads,
Yeah.
um, has too much on their minds or has been doing too much meditating. I mean,
Hmm.
meditating I find can make me dizzy.
Yeah.
you know, it's like afterwards I really do have to work on
Yeah.
grounding, centering. Otherwise, you're just in that place and you end up stumbling around. Like oh
Yeah.
yeah, but
Wow.
it's reading the body. And again, like we have to get quiet, right, to
Hmm.
hear that inner voice. It's like, okay, what is going on with me that I am dizzy or that I just bashed my foot or like we all have moments like this happened just the other day. My one of my Reiki teachers was dropping off some beautiful avocados, and she banged her knee into my gate, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it was her sore knee that she's having problems with to begin
Yeah.
with. So that was a really distressing thing that happened, and she didn't break it or anything, but it's like after she left, I was like, oh gosh, I've been there, done that a million times. It's like your foot is hurting and, things drop on it. You bash it into it's kind of a
Yeah.
sign, your body's telling you rest, good
Hmm.
self care, stop racing around, pull back a little bit. What do you need in this moment? And I find that's a really great self care question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
What do I really need right now?
Yeah.
It might be a nap, it might be a bubble bath, but it might just be slowing down. It might just be, 5 minutes of silence where I can just close my eyes and hit the reset button.
Yeah.
So it's really important to ask yourself that question. And not just when you're having like a sound or Reiki session, but like, throughout the day, if you find you're in a place where your energy just feels, we all know what that feeling is like. My energy is off today.
Yeah.
We say that, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well then it's not just an observation. It's oh right, my energy is off. What do I need right now? Like, and then just getting quiet and saying, oh, you know what? Yeah, I should have recognized this. I haven't had a glass of water and it's 90 degrees. Like I really just
Yeah.
take care of myself. Sometimes it's the littlest things
Yeah.
that don't even take time, but it's just honoring the voice of the inner healer that knows what your body needs right now, right?
Yeah, and sometimes that can be really hard, especially because we internalize so many thoughts. So just
Oh,
to even slow down to know, let me ask myself what it is that I need right
yeah, exactly.
now.
That
Yeah.
is a really hard thing. And okay, I'll tell you, I was on this path. I was doing all of these energy things and sound healing and the whole thing. When that disc ruptured in 2016, I was not listening. I was not
Hmm.
listening to my intuition. I was not taking the time. I was like, I'm way too busy. I have a really busy job. We were doing a lot of traveling. I just taken on a new client. This is for the fundraising nonprofit work that I was doing. And it's like I knew I had to take care of myself. I was not doing it. My back was sending me every signal that a disaster
Yeah.
was about to happen. I was like, okay, well, when I get back from that client meeting 4 days, I'll rest. Then I'll rest. And of course, it
Yeah.
happened. And then the big wake up call, the
Yeah.
universal smackdown, call it
Yes.
field, but it happens. Our bodies. There's a wonderful book, um, Dr. Gabor Mate. It's called
Mhm.
When the Body Says No,
Yeah.
and I recommend that book so highly to everyone because our body tells us what we need to know to take care of ourselves. When we don't listen, our body says no louder and louder and
Yeah.
louder. And sometimes we have to be just completely knocked down by something in order to take care of ourselves.
In order
Yes,
to
I
listen.
have
Yeah.
been on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's like one thing or a few things even that you would recommend to the listeners?
I'd love to recommend some sound healing things that
Mhm.
people can do at home. Okay. You know, sound healing does not need to be expensive. You don't need to go places for it. What they're finding is 5 minutes of sound. Our bodies and brains go into what's called entrainment, where we begin to vibrate with that frequency. We come to that frequency. So if you're at a very low frequency, angry, frustrated, whatever it is, and you play something that's at a higher frequency, you'll get closer to that place. What they're finding is, so it doesn't take a lot of time. That's my first point. Secondly, music that you love is healing. And
Mhm.
everybody says, oh, classical music must be very healing. Well, not necessarily so. If you
Mhm.
love jazz, blues, hip hop, whatever it is,
Yeah.
um, if that music moves you and you love that music is going to be healing. So it's as simple as playing more music throughout your day to get you into a more balanced place where you can hear that inner voice. The wonderful research that I love, this is not new. Jonathan Goldman was doing this search, I think, a couple decades ago. Singing is
Mhm.
very healing. Humming is even more healing because it stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus
Huh.
nerve is called the wandering nerve because it wanders all through our bodies. It helps regulate blood pressure and heart rate and all the things that we don't have to think about, right? The vagus
Mhm.
nerve does that. And the vagus nerve, because our lives are so stressful, we're always running on adrenaline. Like there's always a lot going on in our lives. Very few of us can just, unless you're you know a monk living someplace wonderful and silent all the time. Most of us don't have that life. And we're running on adrenaline, and that is a very unhealthy thing when it's
Yes.
all the time. If we were running from a saber-toothed tiger, that was one thing, but we run on that all through our days in modern life.
Right.
And so the vagus nerve gets very, very confused, and to bring it into balance, a place of coherence, humming is a great thing to do. You can hum while you cook, you can hum in the shower, you can hum to the trees. You don't have to have a good voice. This is
Yeah.
not about singing beautifully or humming beautifully. This is just about the physical reaction that it helps our bodies to become more balanced. The other thing that I love for people who have drums, drumming is an amazing thing. 5 minutes of drumming puts you into such this beautiful place. And other cultures have always used it as a form of trance meditation, right? But
Yeah.
if you don't have a drum, a table, a desktop, a notebook, a pot or pan, but my favorite is just tapping on your body.
Mhm.
EFT tapping, emotional freedom tapping is a wonderful thing. But I'm not
Uh-huh.
even talking about that. I'm just talking about rhythmically tapping on, like, tap, 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 tap on your collarbone,
Yeah.
tap on your wrists or on your forehead. Just tapping, it just brings us into this place of just like immediate. As soon as I did that for you, I was just like, oh, yeah, grounded, centered. We're not
Huh.
in our heads. We're just very, very, it brings us down. And again, it sounds very much like the heartbeat, our mother's
Yeah.
heart. We're in the womb, right? So there is something
Got
very
it.
calming about that. Yeah. And then, of course, if people happen to have, you can buy small Tibetan bowls,
Mhm.
for under usually $30, $40 these days. Some of them are even way more expensive than that. I've made a little ritual morning and night when I do my gratitude. I ring just 3 times. I ring my Tibetan bowl. I say a little prayer or blessing or gratitude. And it
Mhm.
just, I think of it as a reset button, Robin.
Yeah.
It's like, it just changes the whole ambiance. I don't know. You could be running around and crazy, but suddenly everything is just stillness. And it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's who I am as a human being, not a
Right.
human doing, right? So
Yeah.
those are just a couple little ways that people can integrate sound into their days. And like I said, they're finding that 5 minutes of sound is healing. Naturally, if you can do it for longer than that, 20, 30 minutes, in the case of like listening to music, it's a no-brainer, just try to incorporate that into your life. Yeah.
I never understood tapping until you just explained. Like I have spoken to so many hypnotherapists and everything, and they never just explained tapping that simple. Like,
Yeah, well,
that makes sense.
EFT tapping is like a sequence. Like you tap on your forehead and your eyebrows, and I don't even remember the whole sequence actually, but you can just take one little tap on your forehead,
Hmm.
tap on your chest. It just brings you into this present moment in a
Yeah.
way that just sitting here talking about it doesn't. It's like suddenly it's like, oh yeah, focus on my breath. Okay, I can do that. As I'm sitting here tapping, I'm focusing on my breath, right? And it's just
Huh.
like your whole nervous system comes down a notch, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a
That
cool thing.
is very interesting.
And my drum teacher, I play the frame drum, which is a long lineage dating back to the Middle East and all parts of the world. Really had these drums. And my frame drum teacher, Marla Lee Goldstein, I took a class with her last year where she said, and if you don't have time to like actually sit down with your drum, if you're walking down a city street or walking through a park, tap a rhythm on your chest. And
Hmm.
so I just started to do that to practice the rhythms that I needed to learn. And it's very much along the same lines. You can tap anything, it doesn't even have to be a steady beat. You can tap anything at all. You can tap on your wrist, right? And it's like, to me, it's kind of like a wake up call. It's like, okay, Kathy, wake up, get back in
Yeah.
your body, get out of your mind, get back in your body. How
Yeah.
are you feeling? What do you need right now? What do I need right now? Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of a beautiful centering tool.
Interesting. I never knew that. And for all the listeners, what are the ways that they can get a hold of you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, probably the best way is through my website, and that is the name of my book, sufferingtothriving.com. And there they can connect to my social media. I often put articles that I've written. I've written quite a number recently for Yoga Magazine. And there is a great article about sound healing that I
Mhm.
think your listeners will really like, because it takes even a deeper dive, and there are even more quotes about how amazing, and actually has links to the research. So for those people who are skeptical, it's there too. So they can read articles and listen to a couple of podcasts, and I'll put our podcast there too, so that other people in my tribe can find you. Yeah, so that would be the best way, sufferingtothriving.com.
Okay, and that's also for anyone, because you're going to be global, but what area are you in, if you don't mind me my asking?
Oh, yeah, I'm in California. I'm
Okay,
in
so and would they have to, if they want to book sessions with you, they would have to go to that website as well?
Yes, thank you. I always forget about that part. There's a page called Work with Kathy, and you can read a little bit about sound and Reiki healing, and then they can get in touch with me from that point. And the most amazing thing that we learned, Robin, through the pandemic is the results of doing a sound bath on
Yeah.
Zoom
Hmm.
are it's this or Reiki. Distance Reiki has been around for quite a number of decades. It's the
Hmm.
same principle. Energy work like sound healing and Reiki work on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's still a really beautiful one-on-one is always wonderful, but I have clients from everywhere, and we do it through Zoom, and the sound is really good. I always say, use headphones or earbuds, um, and you'll feel deeply the vibration of the
Yeah.
frequencies. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that because I didn't know that you could do that. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, that's when I started doing it, because of course I was doing things in person before then. but then nobody wanted to. And now, actually, I'm not doing much in person. Everything's on Zoom for the
Yeah.
sound healing and even Reiki. Yeah, it's
Huh. That's very
effective.
interesting. I have to look into that.
Yeah, it's
I
cool.
like that. But is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Oh, thank you. I would just say to any of your listeners who might be searching for something to help them heal, again, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, or just dealing with crises in their lives. Um, my book is a toolkit of 38 short chapters. You don't even have to read them sequentially. You can just pick up the chapter that really resonates with you.
Mhm.
And it is about things like making your mind your medicine. I think of all the tools in the toolkit, that is the most important one. And I've heard others of your guests to your podcast talk about this as well. So much of how we live a beautiful life and a healthy life
Mhm.
is by working with our minds,
Yeah.
making our mind our medicine, knowing that in every moment you have a choice, whether you think you do or you don't. You always have a choice. Choose
Mhm.
something different. Choose the good stuff. Yeah, I'll leave.
Absolutely. I like that so much. Kathy, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and actually coming on and spending this time with me. It's been great.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Robin. I just loved our conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm just so glad that we had this conversation. I was very excited to speak with you about it. And you are very informative. Like, I really, really appreciate you because now there's a lot that I have to look up. And I did have one question is
Oh yeah.
you said the vagus nerve. Is that just literally spelled Vegas like Las Vegas?
Oh, very good point. No, it isn't.
Oh, okay.
Like Las Vegas, but it's different. It's V as in Victor, AGAS, vagus nerve.
Okay.
And if you
Okay.
look that up, you'll find out, like I said, it's called the wandering nerve. You could also Google that if you forget, for your
Okay.
listeners who might not have a pencil handy, and can't write it down. You could look up the wandering nerve and it'll come up. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
Very,
because I'm
very
definitely looking that up.
important. Yep. Very important to our health. So thanks for circling back on that.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up myself. But other than that, I thank you so, so much for coming on today.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.
No problem. Everyone, stay blessed and you have a wonderful night.